If you look at game overall, there are two parties involved in game. There's you and the woman, right? And so there's your wants and desires and the experience you want to have, her wants and desires and the experience she wants to have. And that's short-term and long-term both, right? What does she want to have in the next 5 minutes? What does she want to have tonight? What does she want to have in a relationship, right? And I guess I'll give you a quote from someone named Zig Ziglar, who's a salesperson, right? A sales trainer. He said, you can have in life all the things you want if you just help enough other people get what they want, right? And so the idea is you have the thing you want out of dating. And maybe that's not even dating. Maybe that's just sex in some cases, right? And you have the person who can provide that thing, which is the woman, right? And you can have in life all the things you want. You can have from women all the things you want if you help enough women get what they want. Right? That's the difference in that phrase, right? And so to start with yours, right? If your goal is to have sex with women in a way that's not pleasant for them and not fulfilling for them and doesn't come off as a win for them, it's going to be very, very hard, right? However, if your goal is to have sex with women in a way that is fulfilling and is positive for them and comes off as a win for them, they're going to make it very, very easy. And so it may seem that it's very efficient to get to the point. However, it's not. Because what you're doing is you're going to end up, instead of hearing a very slow yes, you're going to hear a very fast no that you're going to have to try and unwind and unwind and unwind as the longer things go, right? And similarly, like there's different ways to like run a business, right? You could run a business by trying to have like amazing like sales copy and lie and swindle and avoid have like a policy where no one can refund and try and just scam all the money in. But that's very hard because you're going to have to consistently get new customers because you're not keeping them, right? On the other hand, you could have a great product and you could treat your customers well. And then over time, each sale is easier and easier and easier because you're selling to people who already bought from you and who are happy with you. And because they're referring their friends to you and that sort of thing, right? And so what may seem expedient at first is not, right? And it's good to have that in your mentality, right? To understand that what you perceive as efficient may not be the absolute most efficient in terms of all of that. Which brings me to escalation a little bit, right? So in terms of escalation, again, it's an experience. It's an experience between you and the woman. And the way I really look at all of escalation and all of dating to a certain extent, and even relationships, all that, everything that's occurring up to sex, it's all part of foreplay. It's all part of the experience for girls. Because girls, when they have sex, it's not just physical, all right? This may shock you. A girl can be with a guy who she has bad sex with and still love him. Now, it'd be better if she had better sex with him, right? But it absolutely can happen, right? Because for her, the sex is not just about the physical, it's also about the emotional and the meaning and the storyline behind it and all those other things, right? And with the right emotions and storyline, you can have situations where literally the girl comes the second you touch her. So a lot of guys trying to be efficient and direct, like this guy over here, with their escalation, they end up being too pushy, right? And it's the same kind of thing. Whereas if this is 0 and this is 100% of the escalation you could get away with, if you one time go to 105%, you're going to get a lot of resistance. You're going to get girl tensing up, girl being slowing things down tremendously, right? And so there's a whole mystery idea that we talked about earlier. It takes 4 to 10 hours to sleep with a girl. I mean, not really. It could take an hour or two potentially, right? But and it depends on the girl. Some will take more, yes, obviously. But if everything along the way is positive, and each time she says yes to you, the next yes gets easier. Now it goes very, very fast. But if she says no one time and it slows you way down, now it goes really, really slow. So if you constantly go to 80, 85% of what you could get away with in terms of escalation, she's going to be enjoying it. It won't be too slow for her, but she'll be wondering, why isn't he doing that last 15%? And she'll be extra comfortable. And when you go to 85% and she feels comfortable with it, now her threshold increases. And now you can go to 85% of that threshold. And it increases, you go to 85% of that threshold. And so by not escalating very fast, you escalate really fast. because you're getting a yes to each escalation. So escalate a little yes, escalate a little yes. And it's almost like exponentially getting faster because of each yes. Each yes makes it easier and easier. The way that you want to escalate and the way that you want to escalate specifically on a date is you would like that escalation to start as early as possible, but in the smallest possible way. Okay? You would like to escalate like one molecule at a time at the start almost. Right? And so like very simple one is you show up on the date, give the girl a hug at the start of the date. Like no girl, or like I can't say absolutely no girl, it's extraordinarily rare that a girl is going to commit her entire evening to you, go on a date with you, and not give you a hug. Like that is a strange girl, right? So give her a hug. I sometimes have greeted dates with a kiss. Usually not like, so if it's a date where you've barely met the girl, probably not. Like an online date, I would not try and greet with a kiss usually. But if it's a girl that you met in like a live interaction and you walk up and like, you know, the vibe is just there and the eyes are there. I've had many live interaction to dates that I've opened with a kiss. And you know if you open it with a kiss, it's going to go well from there. Right? So absolutely you can.
See, I've done that too. My problem is I'm either like super direct, open with a kiss, or like super friendly. It's like that middle point.
Yeah. And so that's how most guys escalate, is they either escalate 0, 0, 0, 0, 0, and then try and rush it all at the end, or they try and like rush right up front, right? And it's because you don't know in between moves, right? You only know all or nothing. You know 100 and 0, right? So it's good to learn some in-between moves, right? One of the old school things in terms of touch is you start off with like touching on the shoulder, right? Touching on the hands, quick little touch on the knee, right? That kind of stuff. And then you start doing that and letting your hand linger a little bit more. As you guide a girl through the crowd, you like put your hand on her back and just let it be there a little bit more. If you lead her somewhere, take her hand. All those are little, very like non-sexual gestures that you can do that are increasing it, right? Also eye contact. Eye contact is non-physical, but it really absolutely is related. It's related to vibe. It's related to physical escalation, all that kind of stuff, right? A lot of my very best dates, especially with really hot girls, it seems like half of the date is us just staring at each other. Like I'll say a line and she's responding to it and I'm just staring at her and we're like making this like deep, intense eye contact. And then she'll respond and then like her thing has an impact and then I'm just having the deep, intense eye contact. Right? And it literally is like there's more time spent just staring at each other than there is talking on some of those dates. And that's completely fine. Right? But eye contact is a big part of it as well. But you want to have little moves along the way. And it's good for your escalations to have pieces to them. Right? So here's an example of an escalation that I do in a bar or a club, which is I take the girl's hands like as a handshake, but instead of shaking like business handshake, I'll shake it man to woman. So like kind of like the way you would if you were dancing with a girl, right? And just that alone is a little bit man to woman. But then if she's very receptive, I'll just put like a light pressure, just a slight pressure on that hand towards me and see what happens. And very often with just a light pressure, the girl will start coming towards me. And then as she's coming towards me, I'm looking at her in her eyes, and that's a little bit sensual. And then if she's coming towards me and looking in the eyes, then maybe I'll like switch. I'll take my hand off her hand. I'll just kind of give her like a little like hug around the back and pull her in. And now all of a sudden, within the first 3 seconds or less of the interaction, you see the girl's like body pressed against mine, like intense eye contact, like fairly physical, fairly intimate. But the beautiful thing was I took no risks, because taking my hand from here to here, not really a risk. Once she's accepted that, putting very light pressure on it, not a risk. Once she's coming towards me, like cradling her into coming towards me, not a risk. And now all of a sudden, it's very intimate. However, if I went up to the girl and was like, hey, how you doing? And tried to hug her as my big, bold move, it wouldn't work, right? And so the key is whatever move you want to make physically, you want to break that down into smaller pieces, right? Break that down into pieces so small that each one is unobjectionable based on the one before it. And again, by doing them, you do the first one, you get a yes, do the next one and get a yes, you actually get there very, very fast. Right? Whereas if you were to go for it directly, which seems faster, and you hear no, now you're going to get there very slow, if possibly not at all. As far as for a date, dates are about 2 things really, right? Maybe 3 things. 3 things on a date that are important. Qualification, escalation, pulling. Those are the 3 things you should think about on the date. Almost nothing else matters. Like what you talk about, the content, basically doesn't matter. You could have a date where you talk about small talk stuff, and then you have some flirting. You can talk about a date where you talk about really sexual topics. That's maybe more ideal, but it works. You could talk about, you could teach the girl stuff and be a very serious intellectual conversation and then escalate around that. You can have all kinds of different dates. But the things that the dates must have, right? You probably need to get the girl to qualify to you, right? You need to get physical, most likely, and you need to figure out how to seed the pull. And so everything you do in the date should be geared around those, right? So where do you choose the location for the date? You should choose a location that's close enough you can pull. How do you want to sit for the date? Well, you want to sit in a place where you can escalate ideally, right? Especially if you're not as good at dating yet. When you get really, really good, that becomes less important. But yeah, generally I had a rule for years that I would only sit at places that were like booths, or where I could sit on the same side, like booths or couches or something like that, where I could sit on the same side with a girl, because it facilitated escalation. So if I'm going to pick the venue, I'm going to pick a venue where escalation is possible, not one where it's impossible, right, or harder.
Was like sitting at like on a couch type setting.
Exactly.
My last date that wasn't as successful was like wine bar, sitting across from each other, and it wasn't plausible to like move closer and like start touching her. So that's where I felt like I was sticking. I was like,
yeah. So if that's the case, you need to escalate in other ways. So instead of escalating physically, if you can't escalate physically, you escalate the sexualness of the conversation, you do more eye contact, and then you also escalate logistically, you move them to another place where then you can. It gets less important. The logistics of the sitting, the better you get at game, but it is very useful, especially if you're still struggling with that escalation. Okay, so yeah, you're choosing the location in a place where it's easy to get home. It's possible to get home, absolutely. You're choosing a place where you can escalate, and then you're going to be escalating little by little by little. And then especially you want to get the girl qualifying. Your whole frame on the date, even before the date, is that the goal is to find out if you like her, right? That's what the purpose of the date is. The purpose of the date is to find out if you like her enough to take her home. And you're in a scenario where you can get physical, you can take her home if she merits it, if she proves it. And if that's your frame and that's subtly coming through in the things that you do, it's going to, first of all, you come across as very high value, but also it's going to come across very genuine, and you're also going to actually be emotionally relevant for the girl at the same time as being very, powerful in terms of, having the right impression of who you are and being a high status guy and all those kind of things, right? So you're giving the girl that experience. And that's the beautiful thing, by the way, is that girls want to chase. And that's the beautiful thing, where you can have the experience you want and give her the experience she wants at the same time, is by getting her to chase.